Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. 1 mere day away from the best sports day on the American sports calendar. The start of the NCAA tournament proper. Yes, there are first 4 games tonight. Yes, there were first 4 games on Tuesday night. No, we will not talk about them because they were, well, the first one was good, but the second one, it made your eyes bleed. Colorado State beat Virginia by 25. Virginia put up a whopping 42 points, put up 14 points in the first half. Didn't belong in the NCAA tournament. We could have been watching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Indiana State committee. You blew it. Maybe next time, put the regular season champ with the higher net rating in the tournament instead of the power conference team that was not very good all year. Crazy thought, I know. All right. We got some news to talk about. We have an incredible interview with new Syracuse coach Fran Brown. And by the way, you're going to be ready to commit to the orange after you hear Fran Brown. If you've not heard Fran Brown before, and remember, he was an assistant at Georgia. They don't do a lot of interviews when they're assistants at Georgia. If you've not heard him talk before, you're going to be very bullish on the orange after hearing him. You're going to be very excited. It will explain how Syracuse flipped this roster the way they did after Fran Brown got hired. And also, by the way, it wasn't a program that needed that much. They returned a lot of production as well. So we'll have Fran Brown later in the show. We will also talk about why Kentucky is the most exciting / maddening team in the NCAA tournament with our friend Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio. We also will talk about Clemson suing the ACC with Pete Nakos. We're going to talk about that in a second to get you prepared. But first, some transfer portal news from Tuesday night. Kadyn Proctor, remember? Nick Saban retires. Kadyn Proctor, offensive tackle who started 14 games as a true freshman at left tackle. 5-star plus recruit from the state of Iowa, had flipped from Iowa to Alabama. Nick Saban retires. Kadyn Proctor enters the portal. He heads to Iowa. Kadyn Proctor apparently spent spring break with some Alabama teammates, some former Alabama teammates, and decided, you know what? I think I want to keep playing in Alabama. So he's back in the transfer portal, or says he's going back in the transfer portal, has told his coaches at Iowa that he's going back in the transfer portal. Kirk Ferentz has acknowledged that Kadyn Proctor has told him that he's leaving. And Kadyn Proctor told our Hayes Fawcett on 3 he plans to re-enroll at Alabama very soon. And then Kadyn Proctor's Instagram story. Just the Michael Jordan, I'm back. This is a very interesting transfer portal story that would not have happened without a federal court decision in December. So remember, you had the free one-time transfer. But because the NCAA was so weird about whether they were going to give waivers to people who transferred the second time or not, because you're supposed to sit out a year. And instead of just saying everybody sits out a year when they transfer a second time, the NCAA had this convoluted waiver process. There was no rhyme or reason as to why they would give them out. Naturally, that pissed some people off. Got taken to court. And a judge said, hey, you know what? These guys that you keep telling us are not employees, you can't really hold them to non-competes the way you could an employee. So, no, those rules don't apply anymore. So until that trial happens, there are no transfer rules. So Kadyn Proctor could transfer to Iowa, spend 2 months there, and transfer back to Alabama and play at Alabama. He doesn't have to sit out. He's good to go. And this is obviously huge for Alabama because Kadyn Proctor, while he struggled a bit early because he was a true freshman playing in the SEC at left tackle, he got real good by the end of the season. Like, go watch that SEC championship game. He was excellent in that game. He has the potential to be a first-round draft pick. This is a big, big pickup for Kalen DeBoer. And remember, we hit the panic button when Kadyn Proctor and Caleb Downs hit the transfer portal shortly after Nick Saban retired. Well, now Kadyn Proctor's back. Caleb Downs still at Ohio State. But it seems like Kalen DeBoer has got things settled down pretty well at Alabama. We talked to Tim Watts from Bama Online last week about how they've been recruiting, the number of visitors they brought in for spring practice. It seems like Kalen DeBoer's got things humming along, and it seems like Kadyn Proctor got some pretty good reports from his former teammates about what things are like at Alabama now, which makes people want to come back. Zach in the chat, the NCAA didn't want to give that waiver for good reason. Yes, and they shouldn't give any waivers at all. That's what pissed people off. It wasn't that they made you get a waiver or that they didn't give you the waiver. It's that they gave some people waivers and some people not, and didn't have any clear-cut criteria for why. If they just said there are no waivers, maybe they would have been okay, but maybe not. Because again, you can't hold non-employees to non-compete clauses. It's pretty simple. So, Kadyn Proctor headed back to Tuscaloosa. Big news. That was a bombshell that came out Tuesday. Another bombshell that came out Tuesday. Clemson suing the ACC. Now, we knew Clemson felt the same way as Florida State. We're pretty sure North Carolina feels the same way as those two. But to this point, Florida State was the only one out there with a lawsuit against the ACC. Not anymore. Clemson has joined the fray, suing the ACC in Pickens County, South Carolina, which is where Clemson is located, adding a third venue to the legal fight over the ACC grant of rights. So now you have the ACC's case against Florida State in the state of North Carolina, Florida State's case against the ACC in the state of Florida, and Clemson's case against the ACC in the state of South Carolina, further muddying the waters. Clemson taking a little different tack than Florida State in its legal argument, and the main thrust of its legal argument, the one that jumped off the page, is Clemson saying, hey, the grant of rights should not apply if we're no longer a member. And obviously, that's what Florida State's going for. That's what Clemson's going for. Florida State and Clemson don't want to be stuck in the ACC when SEC and Big Ten schools make so much more money than ACC schools. They want to try to compete for national titles. The rest of the ACC is not particularly concerned with competing for national titles and does not care as much. But for Florida State and Clemson, this is an existential crisis. So they want out, and they are trying to find a way out. Will they get it? We'll see. We'll talk to Pete Nakos later in the show about this. I don't think this changes my opinion at all. In fact, it reinforces it. Eventually, they will find a number, whatever that number is, for Florida State, for Clemson, for whoever else wants to leave, to pay the ACC to get out. And somebody will pick those schools up. Either the Big Ten or the SEC will pick them up because they're too valuable as football brands. It's going to happen because the ACC cannot afford for this case to go to trial, because there is a non-zero chance that the ACC might lose at trial. If the ACC were to lose at trial, they lose the entire conference for nothing. And your Boston Colleges, your Wake Forest, they go away with nothing. And then they have to renegotiate a TV deal, and they will get pennies on the dollar. And they still may have to do that. But at least if they take some money from these other schools, they can be sitting on a pile of cash and try to invest that or try to save that and mitigate the change, because the change is coming. Now, why did this happen on Tuesday? We don't exactly know, but I have a theory. Tuesday also marked the day that the conferences officially approved the new college football playoff contract. That contract specifies how much money each conference splits from the college football playoff. And guess what? The Big Ten and the SEC get the most. They each get 29%. Each one of them is shelling out $22 million per school from the CFP every year once 2026 hits. The ACC, meanwhile, will get $13 million per school. So that is another $8 million. Sorry, I'm bad at math. Bad at math show. Another $9 million that they're not getting. Add it to the gap. And remember, the SEC and Big Ten already have bigger regular season TV deals, much, much bigger than the ACC. So you're adding that to a gap that was already between $35 and $50 million a year per school. It's not tenable. It can't hold. And, everybody's looking for somebody to blame. Is this Jim Phillips' fault, the commissioner of the ACC? I don't know that it's his fault. I think this was set in motion before he even got the job. The one thing I will say, the alliance, remember the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten, getting together to slow down the 12-team playoff, that looks dumber and dumber with each passing day. Because had they not slowed the 12-team playoff, it might have started earlier. It might have allowed them to get a new TV deal on for the playoff earlier before the SEC and the Big Ten had as much leverage as they have. Now, maybe they still would have done this, but it would have given them a better chance. Florida State would have never been screwed out of a playoff spot this past year. But Jim Phillips got okey-doked by Kevin Warren in the Big Ten. George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12, got okey-doked by Kevin Warren. Those two blew it. They completely blew it. And the Pac-12 is no longer a conference, and the ACC is getting sued by two of its own members. We'll talk more about that with Pete Nakos, On3's national reporter, about what it means, what happens next later in the show. But let us turn to the current ACC, the one away from the courtroom, the one on the field, and a team that you should probably be thinking about in terms of improvement and in terms of a team that could surprise you in the ACC this year. Because Syracuse has a new coach. His name is Fran Brown. He was the DB's coach at Georgia. He's worked at Temple. He's worked at Baylor. He's worked at Rutgers. He's a New Jersey native. Tight recruiting ties in the Northeast. He joined the show, and holy cow, when you hear this guy talk, you will understand why so many good players in the transfer portal said, you know what? I think I want to go play for him at Syracuse. Here's Fran Brown. We are joined now by the head coach at Syracuse, Fran Brown. One of the most exciting new coaches this year because he came in and shook things up, changed that roster dramatically. Fran, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm amazing, and I'm fascinated by what you've done with this program. And you haven't even had a spring practice yet. You start spring practice on Thursday.
Yeah.
How different are things now since when you got there 2-3 months ago?
It's more work as the practices get closer for a head football coach. It's a lot of things you have to do now and different pieces. But the kids are just they understand and they're buying into our culture, which is dark, detailed, accountable, relentless, and tough. Over the last 2 weeks, we haven't had a single player miss a class, so they're locking in on academics, they're locking in on their faith. And then we're just becoming closer as a team. So I think it's different just because the guys care for each other. We brought new guys in, not saying they didn't care last year or whatever, but we brought a lot of new guys in. We brought in at least 20 different new guys, and it's going to be like 34 total, 35 totals that was already have committed to this new team. But we brought in at least 25 new guys. So those new guys getting an add on with the guys that were here. I think they're gelling together well. They're trying to become real brothers. I wouldn't say they're brothers. Yeah, they're like step brothers or cousins right now. They're working into becoming, brothers.
So you talk about guys locking in. You locked in on this job, and the story you've told about this is incredible. This is not how people normally get head coaching jobs, but you texted John Wildhack, the AD at Syracuse, and just said, hey, I want to be in the mix for this. You didn't even tell your agent till after you'd already gotten the job.
Yeah, I just felt it was the best thing to do. I'm represented by a really, really good agent. I asked him to just get me the number. I wanted to go myself and just from different pieces. And, and they got so many guys that they got to represent too, and there's a lot of pieces on it. So I just felt as though let me go and speak for me. If I do it for myself, then that way I won't have any regrets and I won't be able to point any fingers or do anything of that nature. It'll just be all on me. So I just went and did it for myself. Like, you know what? Man, I'm going to get this job for me. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to make sure that I speak what's needed to be spoke about me. I want to make sure that I just dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and that way, if it don't happen, at least I know it didn't happen on myself this time.
Your recruiting philosophy is really interesting to me because I think people look at it like, oh, how I recruit depends on what school I'm at. And you've been at Rutgers, you've been at Temple, you've been at Georgia, you've been at Baylor, all very different kind of places in the college football universe. But you haven't changed your philosophy one bit. I saw you on the Keeping It a Buck podcast, and the host was giving you a hypothetical, like, okay, let's say you got the head coaching job at Monmouth, and this is when you're the DB's coach at Georgia. Do you recruit different players? And you're like, no, I just go get the same. I just go talk to the same guys.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, because like, why would you not go get a player that you really want to coach? Why would you not try to go get the best? The objective of this is two pieces. Recruiting. I'm recruiting you to come be able to play for me, so that way we can win the championship because you're a player that we feel is going to help us. Also, I'm recruiting you, and I'm hoping that you want to come play for me because you feel that I'm going to be able to better you in your life, in your future, help you become the man that you want to become. So why wouldn't I go do that with who I feel is going to give us the best opportunity of winning the championship? I think some people are just comfortable with getting the second guy or getting this one or getting that. Like, I chased my wife for 2.5 years before I ended up, us being together. I was chasing her from 14 years old all the way through 9th grade. She wouldn't talk to me. 10th grade didn't talk to me. Then she finally came to her senses and ended up talking to me after 2.5 years. So, I went after the best there. So I'm going to go do the same thing now when it comes to recruiting and being able to do that.
Well, and the relationships matter so much because even if you don't get that first guy or that second guy, they remember you. They like you. They said, and I was thinking about that. I was reading about you recruiting Kyle McCord, your new quarterback from Ohio State, and the relationship piece of that. Your offensive coordinator's son played with Kyle. Your wife worked with Kyle's dad when she was a nurse. I mean, how much does that matter? Just being able to say, "Hey, we've met. We know each other."
Well, first off, she's still a nurse. We got a lot of school loans, so she don't have to keep working right now. So she's still a nurse, but I think it means a lot because especially nowadays with the portal, and different things of that nature, and them just understand the relationship because everyone says a lot of things, and sometimes, I mean, you got to think these are 18-year-old kids, 17, 18, sometimes they're 19. They're making a decision. Sometimes they're not just making the best decision for them at 33. They're making the best decision for them for the next month or what's going to look really, really good on Twitter or what they may feel is going to happen because all they picture is the best scenario. And they just automatically feel the best scenario is going to happen. They haven't been able to really put the other scenarios into play. They haven't thought about those other scenarios. And, I paint those pictures of the worst scenarios also. Just being able to make her understand everything that could happen. There's more than just one possibility. Yeah, of course we want you to come here, go to be a guy, set the record, be a Hall of Famer, go to the NFL. Yeah, but that doesn't always happen to everybody. That happens 1 out of 25. You know what I mean? So those other 24, what happens with them? How are you treating them? Who are they? When things are bad for them, where are you at as a coach and as a piece of that nature? So, I even hate going that far because most coaches don't even talk about all that stuff. So I'm kind of giving up some of this.
That's what I was about to say is I've talked to so many coaches who talk about that first meeting with a freshman class, and they always ask, how many of you are going to the NFL? Every hand goes up. Mm-hmm. And reality is it's maybe 1 or 2 are going to the NFL. When did you decide to start talking about that in the recruiting process?
As soon as I got hired to be a football coach at Temple University. I understood that and I knew that was important. When I was a freshman basketball coach at Camden High, I knew that all those kids that were on that team, they played freshmen in the 9th grade. So it's a great chance if you play freshman in the 9th grade, you're probably not going to the NBA. So you already started talking to them about life, and things that are going to be important. And instantly I went to college. I was from Camden. I'm sitting right there coaching all these freshman kids in basketball. It is my job to get them to want to go be successful. It's my job to allow them to see that I'm a married man and I'm doing things the right way. So that way these young guys can be able to follow the right path. I mean, sometimes it's not about how you get money, as long as you don't have to degrade your name and things of that nature. You know what I mean? Some of these guys just want to be good fathers and husbands, you know? If I tell you, hey, you're going to become a millionaire, but it's because of someone that you work with before they own something and now you're going to come and start to work with them and your degree is going to pay off, would you really care when you become 35 years old and now you're a multimillionaire because you did pay attention in the classroom? You did have the right education because you knew how to treat people and things of that nature. So my mindset is just, it's more about life. It's more about your faith. Like man, we're men. Like our job is to get these young men closer to the man above. And, you know, football just happens to be my job while I'm working here. It's helping me fulfill my flesh. But the man above wants me to help young dudes get closer to them and show them how to be men so that way they can raise their children and bring their family up the same way. And that way we just continue to just have a better place. You know, make the United States a better spot to live overall.
Well, and you talk a lot about growing up in Camden, New Jersey, and it's obviously not the easiest place to grow up. But I've heard you say it several times, like you saw kind of the gamut of people. You saw bad, but you also saw good. You also saw hopeful. You also saw people who could be role models for you. Who were some of your biggest role models growing up?
Some of my biggest role models aren't even alive, and then some are. But like, so those guys that everybody thought was just bad where I lived at, you know what I mean? Of course, they did other things to make ends meet. You know, I'm not saying that all those things were right or things of that nature, but they pushed me to go the right way. You know, they would always push us to go do the right things and to make sure you stay from around here. Hey, make sure you do this. Hey, we'll buy a basketball court and put us at the top of the block. Hey, stay from around here because this ain't going right up here. Y'all stay up there and play basketball. Stay out the way. You know what I mean? Do things of that nature. And, you know, my uncle, Charles Brown, he became a cop. My mom's brother, I think he was one of my biggest role models, still is. Like, he was more so like the father to me. Like, that was like that's my pops. You know, when it really went back and looked at it. Him just taught us everything, done a lot of stuff. I seen him get to his highest, and then I seen him get to his low where something bad went on. And then I watched how, when things were bad, how he just stayed the course. You know, he worked the same way. Like, I was the environmental service manager for Proctor. I ended up hiring my uncle, who I looked up to and who I loved like a father. I ended up giving him a job after some stuff. And then now he runs that entire piece. Years later, I'm the head coach at Syracuse, and my uncle runs that whole Crocker environment. So that just tells you like the type of men I was around. My high school football coach, Mark Pease, you know, I even actually call him Pops. He just was just there, you know, that was the first guy that I saw like sit down with his wife and family eating and having dinner. My mom, he would let me come and live with him in the summers. I stayed with him 1 year. Then my mom, she allowed me to go there. She trusted Coach Pease a lot. So like before she passed, that's who I would go and just spend a lot of time with, you know, and he taught me just to be different. And honestly, role models like just my uncles in the neighborhood and, you know, different people, it's different names of guys that I'd rather not really say, but, you know, just to bring their names up. But like those guys were role models. My wife, just from being with her and just watching how she was pregnant, had my youngest son, still went to school for anesthesia, and I just watched how she worked and just kept getting A's on every test. Every test was like the deal breaker of the lifetime, and she would always come back with an A. Like, she became a role model. Just like people that work hard, you know what I'm saying? Like Matt Rule, I can't sit there and tell you that I don't look up to Coach Rule. Like, you know, man, Matt was like always, like, he's my oldest son's godfather, and that was like, well, like.
And so you were playing JUCO ball in New York, and a young Matt Rule who worked at Western Carolina, Cullowhee, North Carolina, shows up. So there's this dude from New York coming to see a guy from New Jersey to come to Cullowhee, North Carolina. What does he say to get you there?
So let me tell you this, and Coach Rule will tell you this. Rule wasn't coming there for me. They were coming for someone else. The coach didn't think that I would get done all my schoolwork in 1 year, but see, I had a plan. I went in the summer. I took 12 credits. During the school year, during football season, I was taking 21 credits. So I took 21 credits. I ended up passing 18 of those 21. I stayed up over the Christmas break. And then I met Coach Rule when I see him in the hall. I said, Coach, trust me, I got a plan. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pass. I'm gonna take 18 credits now. I'm gonna pass these ones. I'll be up here for Christmas. Next semester, I'm gonna take another 15. Then in the summertime, I'll take 12. I'm going to have 60 credits in a year. You need to recruit me. I'm the best corner in the conference anyway. Like, and then he went through. He watched my tape. Then he called me, and then like he was from Coach Rule from New York, so that kind of like took it from there about him being from New York. And then I just started asking him questions about the school. We was purple and gold. I went to Camden High, purple and gold, and we was playing against NC State. Our first 3 games was like NC State, Duke, different people, but NC State had Phillip Rivers, Jericho Cotchery, T.A. McClendon, Mario. Like, I mean, just all those dudes, they was like killing. Like, and that was a real good game for us. It was a good. I played pretty well. They beat the brakes off of us, and I just remember the whole game crying because I got left back as a senior in high school. Went to JUCO, was able to do all that stuff within a year, and then I was now getting an opportunity to play college football for real after that year. Like, I got a guy on my staff I hired named Emmanuel Mark. We played JUCO ball together one year, and he'll tell you like it was like every day was just important to me. And I've just been on a mission ever since. Being able to see it every day was important.
How much does telling your own story when you're talking to these players, the ones you inherited and also the ones you're trying to recruit, how much does that help you connect, help you, build a bond that,
I think they understand that and they know that, and they know I want what's best for them, and they know I'm not taking no BS. Like, you're not going to get over on me. I'm gonna find out, and then when I find out, I'm gonna come at you about it. I don't mind confronting the best player, like Aronde Gaddison and Kyle McCord. They will be confronted by me. But I'll confront the guys that are the best players on the football team, because I think when you really confront them and when they see them do it, and I do it in front of their peers, it puts everyone else in place. And it's not from a place of like I'm trying to show them the man. It's from a place of, why are you trying to mess your future up? I'm not going to allow you to do that. We're not going to do it that way. You got too much at stake. Like, why would we mess that up? We're going to do this the right way. So,
your first college football game was a Syracuse game. Donovan Darius, Camden guy.
Yeah.
Dwight Freeney, he's from Connecticut. Like, the best Syracuse teams always dominated the Northeast in recruiting, whether it was Jersey, whether it's New England, whether it's Pennsylvania. How do you get back to dominating those areas?
Just working daily. Being consistent. You got a lot of coaches in the Northeast, man. There's some great programs up here right now. Everybody's doing a good job, I think. I look at all the schools, and I just take my hat off to everybody in the whole Northeast right now. The Big Ten and the ACC, as I'm watching what they're doing. I'm like, wow, these guys are going. So it's no better time, in my opinion, for me to show what our staff can do, and who we are and what the program can do. There's no better time right now because everybody's in their scale is up, the trajectory is up for everyone. So why not show that we can be the best, And I want to compete. These dudes are really smart. They're intelligent, man. They've been doing it a long time. Let's just see who's going to outwork each other. And they know, they all understand it. I better work because I'm going to work. I don't have to sleep. So let's put the work in. I'm going to compete. I want them coming at every one of them the same way they will come at us. Let's compete. And then we'll get an opportunity to compete on the field. But whatever stage or whatever part of the year it is that we can compete, they better be busting their butt to compete, because I am. I'm saying I want to win.
You don't have to sleep. You got a kid in college, but you also got a young one, like a 2.5-year-old, right?
I got a 2.5-year-old daughter. I got an 11-year-old son who's here every day. He thinks it's his programming, honestly. So he actually told the equipment guy to get his name next to mine. It's like 2 lockers, and they wouldn't put his name next to it. It's like, oh, your son said do it. So you go in there now, it say Kadyn Brown right next to my other little locker. He's funny. Then my 2-year-old daughter, life-changing. Everyone says it, but just to have a daughter, it's a different ball game. And the brains of the family, my wife is, but then my 19-year-old son, Fran, he's just becoming a good athlete. Just watching him. I got to work him out here last week before he went back. And, I work him out. Usually I just try to stay away from him, but I went in there like, all right, I'm going to do it. Come on. Worked out a few days and just watching him get better. I think they're doing a good job at his school, but seeing the way he runs and moves. And he's in school for mechanical engineering, and then he's still doing a really good job in the field. He'll have a chance to compete to play this year. So just excited to watch him. I'm hoping that our schedules kind of go off a little bit. I didn't look at ours yet because I'm trying not to jinx myself or whatever, but hoping that I get an opportunity, at least watching one spring practice and be able to go up. But I'm just, man, my family, like my wife, she's amazing. Just those 3, I don't know what I would do without them. I think I have the perfect family for what I'm doing right now and in the time of my life. And they're all understanding of the time. and appreciated. My daughter doesn't know, but I'm just happy for them.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask about this because you mentioned your oldest. He's at St. Francis in Pennsylvania playing. And did being a dad in the recruiting process change the way you look at the recruiting process at all?
It changed the way I coach the kids. It doesn't change the way I look at the recruiting process. I recruit the same way, but it changes the way I coach them because of karma. I mean, you know what it says. Karma comes back on your oldest. So, like, Franny not about to get no BS because of what his dad did. So I just look at, how do I want my son treated? He's in school right now. What calls do I want to take from him? How would I respond if if the shoe was on the opposite foot? So I just treat him all the way I want Franny treated. And that's important to me, that I make sure I treat him that way. And it's just like telling everybody, right? And I use this, something I always tell people and say, everybody say, I'm gonna treat him. I love him. I love your kid like a son, man. I love him like a son. I'm not gonna love none of these kids the way I love my children, but I'm gonna treat them all the way I want them treated. That love that I have for my son and for my oldest son, for my second son, for my daughter, I can't love none of the kids that way. But I'm gonna treat them the same way I want them treated. I do love them. I want the best for them. I want all those things, but like my sons, like they were life changing. I became a man because I had children. I was able to grow up. I couldn't do the same things that I did when I was me and my wife, just us two. It was a little bit different. I'm going to the club. I'll see you later. Oh, we get in an argument. I don't care. I'm going out. Are you going out? Like, now you got children. It's like, oh, snap. Okay, listen. What did I do? It became all that, and I ain't worrying about that. To now, what did I do? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's about more sorry than just the other piece of it. But just having my children they changed my life. I can't say they saved me because I knew what I wanted in life, but my children changed my life. They changed my thought process. My wife, she's changed my life and my thought process. So it's just a different ballgame.
Well, cannot wait to see what this program becomes. Spring practice this week. Coach, thank you so much.
I appreciate you, man. You be safe, all right?
Yes, sir. That's Fran Brown. And yeah, look at that Syracuse schedule, by the way. Take a look at that schedule. Look at what they bring back. Look at what they brought in. We mentioned Kyle McCord, Fadil Diggs, who started every game for Texas A&M at edge rusher last year. Look at the schedule. Yes, Georgia Tech in week 2. That's going to be tough. I've told you time and time again, Brent Key's doing a great job there. At UNLV, won't be fun. At NC State, won't be fun. But there's a lot of winnable games on this schedule. This is a team that if they are improved over last year, you are talking about a pretty darn good record at the end of this season. So be excited about Fran Brown. If you're wondering what the win total is at FanDuel, well, 6.5. So if you're thinking about what you just heard and what you're seeing on this schedule, 6.5 over seems kind of manageable. 7 wins, 8 wins, that seems manageable. And I don't want to be the sunshine pumper who says take every over, but this case, Tennessee's case the other day when we were talking about it, it feels like it's doable. You know what else feels like it's doable? Kentucky roaring through the NCAA tournament and winning a national title, because when this team is on, it's electrifying to watch. You know what's also doable? Kentucky not getting out of the first weekend. It is both teams at once, and that is the never-ending source of fascination and frustration for Kentucky fans. Why the pressure is on John Calipari this week heading into the first round. This is a team that can win the national title. It needs to make a deep run. Otherwise, Big Blue Nation is going to be big blue mad. Nick Roush from Kentucky Sports Radio joins us to preview the most fascinating team in the NCAA tournament. We welcome Nick Roush from Kentucky Sports Radio. And the last time we talked to Nick, feels like things were going to hell in a handbasket. Kentucky's about to lose its offensive coordinator in football. The Cats were having a little bit of a losing streak on the court. But that was like a month and a half ago, Nick. And I got to say, the SEC tournament result aside, Kentucky feels like a very dangerous team going into the NCAA tournament.
Oh, it's total devil on one shoulder, angel on another, of just competing thoughts, right? Your head is telling you all of these crazy stats, like no team has ever won a national title after losing in the first round of its conference championship. Every Kentucky Final Four team since 1978 has at least gone to the SEC championship game. But then you remember, like, oh, we can't let conference tournament week poison the well. That was their floor, but their ceiling is so high, and that's kind of been what this team has been all season. A team with an incredibly low floor, but also it can reach the highest of highs. And so I think the Big Blue Nation is just trying to tell itself, hey, that was the floor. Maybe we just got it out of the way. Maybe we got the bad out of the way before we see the best of the best for Kentucky. And when you look around at the draw, Kentucky fans, we love to complain about the draw. We've done it time and time again. No complaints this year. No complaints whatsoever, right? This is a very palatable draw where you can see Kentucky getting to Phoenix in the Final Four for the first time since 2015.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Angel and the Devil on the show. I feel like we saw the Angel and the Devil in a 2-game span, with Kentucky going down to Knoxville, beating Tennessee, the last game of the regular season, looking like a team that could cruise to the Final Four. And then the Texas A&M game, all of the stuff you worry about comes back. So, all right, let me give me a perfect scenario. Like, what needs to happen? Who needs to play well? What would make it possible for Kentucky to get through this region, which Marquette on their side of the bracket, you wind up with Duke or Houston probably if you're trying to get to the Final Four. Like, what does Kentucky need to do very well to get through this bunch?
I think some of it is just how well do the complementary players play? When you saw them at their worst, right, against Texas A&M, Justin Edwards and Adu Thiero combined for 9 points. Justin Edwards didn't hit a three. He had been on a heater to end the season. I think 4 out of his last 6 games were in double figures. He knocked down a bunch of threes against Tennessee. I think he plays a really significant role because you kind of know what you're going to get with Reed Shepherd. Antonio Reeves is going to score 20 points unless the refs foul him out. And then Rob Dillingham is like on an every other game pace, right? He goes nuclear. So you kind of know what you're going to get there. You're not expecting a ton from the centers, but it's that Adu Thiero and Justin Edwards combination at the 3-4 spot. How reliable are they both defensively and offensively? Because I think they played a key role in that Tennessee game. And also, I mean, Connect had 40, but they were all up in his face. They didn't give him nothing easy. And the guys that have typically given Kentucky trouble in March are those sort of stretch fours. So I think those guys play a huge, huge role for Kentucky. And then the other thing is, Andy, it's been the biggest talking point of the year. And I think Calipari might finally be willing to wave the white flag and say, all right, guys, you might be onto something here. The starting lineup it's just been an issue. They were down 8-1 against A&M. They were down, I think, 9-2 early. It's just, you don't need to dig yourselves into early holes. And Andy, I think some of the yelling and screaming about who's starting, Cal was right when it came specifically to Justin Edwards. You know, he doesn't want to give up on guys in fear of losing them for the season. And it worked for Edwards. But you're at a point now where, like, that 5 that starts the first half and the second half, they never play again. They only start for like 3 minutes, and Dillingham and Reeves come in. So it's like you're just wasting time. There's no time to waste. The time is now. It's March, and at least Cal alluded to potentially making some changes to the lineup in his coach's show. But he's seemingly the only person that likes that lineup. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it, though, because I was thinking back. So that Kimball Walker team, the one that won 5 games in 5 days and then ripped through the NCAA tournament, Calhoun did that with that team. And I always was so confused by it. But you would trot this lineup out, and at the under 4 timeout, you'd bring in your real lineup. And I didn't understand why you wouldn't just start with that one.
Some coaches, they especially college basketball, where you have your just grips on everything. Like, there's just a hesitancy to relinquish power, to admit you're wrong. And here's the thing, is like, those individuals have their moments, right? Like, Ugonna and Yenso to start the Tennessee game blocked 3 shots right off the bat. And you knew, like, okay, this is a game. He's going to be vital. Same thing with Adu Thiero or Edwards. But it's just that combination with DJ Wagner and Reeves. Like, DJ DJ had a streak where he was, I want to say, 8 of 12 from 3 over a 3-game span. He's taking steps forward, but it's just pairing him together. It just doesn't work. So maybe you sit a Duthiero out and you let Reed Sheppard play there. So you have 3 guards and you play a little bit smaller. This opening round games against a team in Oakland that plays a ton of zone. So that makes more sense. Really the centerpiece of this all, Andy, is this felt like a make or break year for Kentucky going in, and it was all going to matter to March. Well, now it's here. We had all this excitement going in the SEC tournament, and the air got let out of the balloon right away. And so the anxiety, the pressure, it's mounting. And you can kind of feel it with John Calipari too, because he's talking about getting rid of the clutter and don't put any more pressure on the players. It's like, Cal, we ain't putting the pressure on them, buddy. It's all on you. It's all on you.
And that's
Cal.
exactly right. It has been 5 years since, by God, Kentucky basketball made the second weekend in the NCAA tournament. Now, I realize there wasn't a tournament in 2020. That's still not an excuse.
No.
Like, this is, and you look at the situation. If they get past Oakland, they're going to get NC State or Texas Tech. Both teams they should be able to beat.
Correct.
Like, there's no excuse for them not to be in the second weekend.
No, none whatsoever. And I feel like I have all of those spidey senses tinkling where every time I say something like that, I feel like I'm putting bad juju on them. Kentucky plays in the 7-10 slot on Thursday, the same time slot they lost to St. Peter's. So there's all sorts of PTSD just hanging over this team. And then you were like, well, it's a homecoming for John Calipari to Pittsburgh, and Duthiero's from there, and so is Trey Mitchell, and Justin Edwards is not too far away. And all the while, it's just Kentucky fans, we just love this team. They're so much fun, and you don't want to see this fun team. You don't want their road to come to an end early and have it be a what if instead of a banner year where you think about this team fondly for years to come.
How hard will Kentucky fans laugh if St. Peter's eliminates Tennessee in a 15-2 game?
And fortunately, that game is being played after the Kentucky game, because I think there may have been some folks, myself included, who might have enjoyed that Tennessee loss Friday morning at the SEC tournament a little bit too much. But here's the thing, Andy. Rick Barnes has a reputation in March for a reason. But one thing he does well, he does not lose to mid-majors and opening round games. He's good against mid-majors and opening round games. So he can take care of business, but St. Peter's can do the funniest thing. The funniest thing.
Oh, yeah. All right. Before I let you go, Nick, I'm going to give you a scenario. And this, let's just say they get past Oakland and Greg Rempe, 40 years, congratulations. Here's your gold watch, all that good stuff. And they're playing either Texas Tech or NC State to get to that second weekend for the first time since 2019. And it comes down to the wire. There's 8 seconds left. Kentucky's got the ball. They're down 1. Who do you want taking that shot? Rob Dillingham or Reed Sheppard?
I'm saying Reed Sheppard 7 out of 10 times, with the caveat that it could be a Rob Dillingham nuclear game. And that's the only way to describe it, because there's times where he's just like Allen Iverson is the only comparison I can think of, because he's just doing stuff that and it's no. Yes. I mean, it's stuff that just makes no sense, but he's just flicking it from like his waist over his head, over 3 guys, and banking it off the glass. So if he's having one of those games where he's unstoppable, untouchable, a walking flamethrower, then I say Rob, but I trust Reed Sheppard's decision-making skills. He's already got a buzzer beater to his name against Mississippi State. And in that game, we remember the buzzer beater, but he also had the block shot before that, the steal and dunk in transition. He is cool as a cucumber and collected under pressure. Reed Sheppard is the guy that has exceeded the Big Blue Nation's wildest dreams, and he can really cement himself as an all-time great with an outstanding run this March.
Counterpoint. LSU was one of those Dillingham nuclear games. He made what looked like basically 2 NBA game winners, and Kentucky lost on a buzzer beater. So I think I make a Reed Sheppard on this. Yeah,
and the part of me is that, like, it's great that you have those options, and there's so many, like, oh, well, yeah, you have Mississippi State, but you also had LSU, where it was like kind of fluky at the end. Mississippi State, they were up by 8 with a minute left, and they blew that lead. They blew a lead against Kansas. So that's why ultimately I think we're going to end where Kentucky fans are the most conflicted. It's going to be the most conflicted March possible, where they're looking great. They stormed the Sweet 16, possibly get some revenge against Florida, who upset them in overtime at Rupp Arena. That could be a high-scoring, dramatic affair where they win a tight one. You're feeling good about them. And then they just get completely swallowed by Houston in the Elite Eight, where, hey, it's good. We're back to the Elite Eight, but like it's still not good enough. And that could lead to just another 6 months of arguing and bickering, of uncertainty. And we'd have it no other way over the last 5 years of John Calipari. Just the total gray area. And that's unfortunately how I kind of see things going for this team in the NCAA tournament.
Nick, we're going to talk next week, no matter what happens. I'm not sure what I want to happen.
I hope
I'm not sure which version of Nick I want. I just want you on the show. That's all I care about.
Okay. Well, if there's any sort of heartbreak involved, I'll give Tennessee fans what they want. Okay, Andy, I can promise your Tennessee viewers and listeners they will get what they want. But if not, I'm going to be the most obnoxious person possible. So if the Cats are in Phoenix, oh, buddy, whoo.
Well, I think the only response to that is go Big Blue. Because that's the Nick I want.
Yes.
Nick, thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Andy.
Watching Nick Roush vacillate between I know this team can win the national title and I might be looking at another first weekend exit is fascinating to me. And Nick is emblematic of the folks in the Big Blue Nation. He expresses it better than most. But there's thousands, more than hundreds of thousands, maybe 7 figures of people just on pins and needles right now because they know they've got a team that can go deep. But what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? Willie in the chat. Does anyone else think Nick sounds like Mr. Garrison from South Park? He kind of looks like Mr. Garrison. We got to blow his head up a little more. But he didn't once say, first weekend losses are bad. He didn't say that. I love Nick Roush. We're having Nick Roush on next week, regardless of what happened. Regardless of whether Kentucky is still in the tournament or not. And again, even though I said obnoxious Nick's the one I want, heartbroken Nick is a highly entertaining too. So we're going to win either way. Kentucky may not win, but we're going to win. You know who's not winning right now? The ACC. It's been a bad week for the ACC. Florida State was already suing the ACC. The ACC was already suing Florida State. But on Tuesday, Clemson joined the fray, filing its own lawsuit against the ACC. Pete Nakos, On3 national reporter, joined us to break it all down. You hear the horns and you know what that means. It's breaking news. Clemson has sued the ACC, the second member institution to sue the conference in the past 3 months. Pete Nakos from On3 joins me. Pete, we've been reading through this complaint, and basically it is Clemson saying, we would like some clarity from you, state court in South Carolina. This lawsuit was filed in Pickens County, South Carolina. So if you are keeping score, the ACC has sued Florida State in North Carolina. Florida State has sued the ACC in Florida. And now Clemson has sued the ACC in South Carolina. So we have 3 venues here. And Clemson is saying we need some clarity on this grant of rights, on these withdrawal penalties. And basically, Pete, there's a lot of, what if Clemson wasn't a member of the ACC? Would the grant of rights still hold?
I don't think they would hold, Andy. But man, just reading through this lawsuit in the first 30 minutes since it dropped, maybe 40 minutes, full of bangers. I mean, Clemson just kind of kicks it off right away, right? The ACC grant of rights hinders Clemson's ability to meaningfully explore its options regarding conference membership. Clemson wants out, and this is official.
Yeah, they definitely want out. And so it's amazing how many times they come to this. And obviously in a complaint, you're trying to cover all your bases. But it says the media rights to games played while Clemson is a member of the ACC are the only rights necessary for the ACC to perform the conference's obligations under the ACC's media rights to the ESPN. The media rights to games played at a time when Clemson is not a member of the ACC were never part of any grant of rights. And our assumption all along, and that's from talking to people at the conference, and this is, going back years, is that this was this ironclad thing that lasted till 2036. And we've seen Florida State challenge it. And now we've seen Clemson challenge it. In Florida State's challenge of it, and I believe this is also in Clemson's challenge, Pete, but this is redacted in Clemson's challenge because it's part of the ESPN ACC contract, which the Clemson said, just redact this and then make the ACC prove why it should be redacted. Otherwise, we're going to open it up. But Florida State sort of let the cat out of the bag. ESPN has an option that it can pick up as of February 2025 for 2027 through 2036. So this is all coming down the pipe really fast.
Yes.
And it sure seems like Clemson, like Florida State, is ready to explore other conference membership.
So Clemson is definitely willing to and happy to explore new conference membership. This is something that Clemson has been working on for months, right, Andy? I mean, you and I both heard this. This is not some major shocker. And the other thing that jumps out too, right, is the ACC. I wrote it in my story, right? They just don't want to pay the exit fee, and they're not exactly challenging the current grant of rights in the sense of they just want to be able to move on. And I guess what I'm trying to get to, what I mean, is and correct me if I'm wrong here, right? But Clemson just wants to get out of the grant of rights, and they're not challenging the actual grant of rights. They're just trying to move on. And I know I know that's a word.
Yeah, if you ask Jim Phillips, he would tell you that no, the ACC owns the rights after you leave.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Clemson's saying that's not true. But what Clemson is also saying, and this is something Florida State has said, is the $140 million withdrawal fee is an exorbitant penalty that isn't enforceable. And that's what all of these entities are trying to get clarity from the court system before they make a move. And even the ACC's lawsuits against Florida State essentially asks for clarity. It asks for the court to affirm the grant of rights and say, hey, this is legal and binding. You guys are stuck. So we have now 3 venues. We have 2 schools that have sued. We know there are 2 others who want out and could potentially do the same thing, North Carolina and Miami. Now, North Carolina has been pretty diplomatic about all of this. Bubba Cunningham just last week was in an interview. He's the athletic director of North Carolina, was saying, hey, we can protect ourselves and look ahead, but we also don't have to be as aggressive. But I do wonder now that Clemson has joined the fray, because before it felt like everybody was looking at Florida State going, yeah, but that's a little, I don't know. You guys are a little aggressive for our taste. Maybe we do this a little bit differently. But now that Clemson's joined the fray, I feel like this could open the floodgates.
Right. And the other thing that's in this lawsuit that we haven't talked about that indicates how Clemson feels and maybe other schools feel is Clemson writes in this lawsuit that they weren't asked to vote on the ACC filing the lawsuit against Florida State, and they didn't sign off on it. That's the clearest as day as Clemson can be, that, hey, we're on Team Florida State now. We want Florida State to win out in their lawsuit. We want to win our lawsuit. And it probably also signals to North Carolina probably didn't sign off on this lawsuit. So that really jumps out. And obviously, getting back to the point I was trying to make is Clemson wants the court to rule that it doesn't have any fiduciary duties to the ACC.
Correct. Yes. That they're not in a joint venture together, that these schools are not in a joint venture. And that was interesting. I don't believe that's in Florida State's lawsuit. That's a little bit different tack. So we'll see. And interestingly enough, like these different schools attacking the ACC in different ways, probably bad for the ACC. CU Tigers Win in the chat says, what is the conference war chest for lawsuits before they have to ask the teams in the conference for more money to fight the lawsuits? They could be fighting 4 to 6 at once. That's true. Because if North Carolina and Miami were to join, or if, say, Virginia decided to join, I don't know that they would, but that would be pretty tough. And to fight on all these different fronts in all these different states, because you have to hire attorneys who are experts in that state's law.
Yep.
And it could get pretty expensive. Now, I've said for a long time, this is going to come to a number at some point.
Yes.
This is never going to trial. This will get settled. Florida State and Clemson or whoever else and the ACC will come up with a number.
Yep.
The question is, what's the number? What is it going to cost?
You've written about it before, right? I mean, the ACC clearly is very open to negotiations. They alluded to it in a previous filing. I believe that one was in the.
I don't know if they're open to negotiation. That was in their lawsuit against, or the Florida State lawsuit against the ACC in Florida. And basically what the ACC was saying is it's a commercial possibility that you could just buy your way out. But from what people have told me, that is the lawyers just basically countering all of Florida State's arguments, not necessarily the ACC saying we're open for business, let's negotiate. I do think they're going to have to come to that at some point, though.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it has to happen. You've written about this. I've kind of talked to some people about it. It seems like the number, right, is what, 275, give or take, with the highest being around 500 million, I believe.
572 million is what Florida State put in their lawsuit as what they feel is kind of the max, where you add the total of the TV rights through 2036 plus the withdrawal fee. 572 is the number they come up with.
Yeah.
I think if you told them you could get out for 150 million today, they would write the check tonight. So realistically, the number you come to is somewhere in between there. And the thing about this, Pete, that I think is interesting, people always want, we get a lot of questions when the ACC added Stanford and Cal and SMU.
Yeah.
And my thinking was always, this is backfilling to make sure you're still taking care of your TV agreements if you lost members. And that way you're already set up to have 15 members, including Notre Dame, which is a non-football member.
Yeah.
Even if you were to lose, let's say you lost Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, then you'd still have the right number of members. Your TV contract could still be in effect. But this is interesting because you wonder how quickly anybody else jumps in, because it took a few months for Clemson to get here. They're kind of operating under the radar.
Yeah.
What do you think it was that generated this now?
They have obviously been working on this for months. I don't think it was exactly hey, like, this happened, so now we need to file the lawsuit. I think they did their due diligence and they got to the point where they felt very comfortable moving forward with this. I do think, though, and this is overarchingly, right? Like, the NCAA is as powerless as ever, right? With these preliminary injunctions with the transfer portal and NIL. I think the college sports landscape lends itself to Clemson and Florida State winning these lawsuits. And I think the pressure is bigger than ever against the ACC, where the ACC will probably want to settle at some point rather than see how this plays out in the court. Because in my opinion, and in some attorneys I've talked to, I think that there's an opinion that Florida State and Clemson probably could win in the court. And that I don't think that is something the ACC wants to see play out.
They can't. That's the thing that that's why I've been so certain when I've said this. As long as there's a non-zero chance of the ACC losing any of these lawsuits, they can't go to court. They can't take it to trial. They would have to settle it, because the option if you lose, or the consequences if you lose, are all of this falls apart and you get nothing. Now, if you settled with Florida State and Clemson and let's say North Carolina, and let's say you settled for $250 or $300 million each, which sounds like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme, it's actually basically paying a mortgage if you wind up if they wind up in the Big Ten or the SEC, they kind of break even over the next 10 years.
Right.
It's at least you'd have a pile of cash sitting there to deal with whatever happens next.
Yeah.
That feels like the best alternative at this point.
I guess the question I pose to you now, Andy, though, is let's say that does play out, right? And let's say, I don't know, Virginia and North Carolina join, and now you're 4 schools down. At what point does the ACC need to like really sit down and consider what happens next, right? Because you lose those 4 schools and the TV product is devalued and the conference is devalued. And you have to think at some point, does Jim Phillips turn to the Big Ten or the SEC and ask, will you absorb us? And I know that sounds so earth-shaking, and I know some people would say
he should have been asking that
but
2 years ago.
Well, right. I mean, the alliance did what it
Yeah.
did, but I guess the question is, do you think that day is coming sooner than a lot of people think?
Well, I think the answer to that would be no. I think the answer to that would be we'll take what we want and you guys deal with whatever happens next. And so here's what I'm thinking. One significant thing that happened on Tuesday, or I think it happened late Monday. Remember, we knew that the conferences were set to agree on the new college football playoff contract that went through 2032. And so we saw Ross Dellinger report, I think Tuesday morning, that memorandum of understanding has been signed and it's been executed. Well, what does that do? What does that particular thing do that's significant? What it does is it codifies the ACC as a second-class citizen, and the Big 12 for that matter.
Yeah.
So the revenue split, the way the new college football playoff revenue split will work starting in 2026 is the Big 10 and the SEC each get, I believe, 29% of all the money.
Roughly $22 million per school, I believe.
$22 million per school. The ACC gets 21%, which is $13 million per school. So you've just added $8 million to a revenue gap, $8 million a year per school to a revenue gap that was already going to be $30 to $50 million a year, depending on whether it's the SEC or the Big Ten we're talking about.
Yeah.
If you're Florida State and you're Clemson and you're North Carolina and you could potentially go to one of these things if you were available, you have to do something at that point.
Yeah.
They've put it in writing now.
Yeah. I mean, you read the lawsuit today, right? And at one point, the Clemson attorneys write in the complaint, it's Clemson's athletic department like responsibility, I'm paraphrasing here, that they need to go seek new membership in another conference because of the revenue gap. And yeah, it's bigger than ever. It's where college sports is right now. It doesn't seem to be slowing down, especially with this new ESPN deal. And I know that there's been plenty of reports how ESPN isn't going to give more money if they go to 14 or 16.
Right.
But at the same time, right, this is the landscape they're in, and the money isn't going to change, which also means that the SEC and the Big Ten are the richest of the rich.
Right. And that's not changing, and that's only going to get bigger and worse. And so if you're Florida State, if you're Clemson, and here's the thing, a lot of people keep asking this, and it's a legitimate question. Let's say they get out. Is somebody going to take them? And I would argue that if I'm the Big Ten, if I'm Fox, which is really in charge of the Big Ten in terms of television and everything.
Yeah.
I look at the SEC schedules, what they came out with the 16-team version once they added Oklahoma and Texas, and I look at that and I go, you know what? Their product is still a lot better than ours. We've got to find a way to improve our product. If you could sprinkle Florida State and Clemson across all of the Big Ten schedules, suddenly it's a lot better product. Now, if you're the SEC, you go, wait a second. That's our geographic territory. That's our footprint. Yeah. Do we want to let them into our footprint, or do we choke them out and improve our product?
Yeah, I mean, and now you have a realignment battle on your hands, right? You just made the case. The Big Ten and the SEC both have great reasons to add, and I know, right? South Carolina loves to be the only SEC school in the state, but at the same time, if you're Greg Sankey, you got to bring your presidents together and say, like, hey, we can only add value to our product with adding in Clemson or a Florida State. So yeah, it's so we currently have a situation where the SEC and the Big Ten are working together, but if certain events play out, they could be pitted right against each other again.
It is amazing. And that's college athletics in 2024 in a nutshell. So to review, the ACC sued Florida State and North Carolina first because they knew that Florida State was going to sue the ACC in Florida, which happened the next day. That was in December. On Tuesday, Clemson sues the ACC in South Carolina. God only knows what Wednesday will bring. Pete Nakos, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is Pete Nakos, and I realized I made a mistake earlier. We were talking about Nick Roush. Somebody said he looked like Mr. Garrison from South Park. I got my bald South Park Elementary faculty members confused, and I was doing a Mr. Mackey impression. Nick Roush does kind of sound like Mr. Garrison. So we got to get him we got to get him a little puppet. We got to see if he's got a Mr. Hat. We'll work on that. We'll workshop that for next week. But right now, we got to talk about tonight. We got games in the first four. Grambling against Montana State. Listen, I am all for HBCU pep bands in the NCAA tournament proper. So I realize the Bobcats, the chosen school of Dutton family, I realize they're 4.5-point favorites. No. Give me Grambling State. Give me them to pull the upset. I want that pep band in the tournament. I want that pep band front and center when they're playing Purdue. And remember, Purdue lost to a 16 last year. Fairleigh Dickinson won a first four game to earn the right to play Purdue. So the winner of this game, maybe following in Fairleigh Dickinson's footsteps. Yeah, give me Grambling. And then the next game, which assuredly will be more exciting than the Colorado State-Virginia game was, because nothing could be worse than that game. There is no possible basketball game that could be worse than what you had to watch last night. This one will be more fun. Colorado's 2.5-point favorite against Boise State. The winner plays the Florida Gators in Indianapolis on Friday. I don't know where to go with this one. I was 1-1 last night, by the way. I was 1-1. Got the Wagner-Howard prediction wrong. Got the Colorado State-Virginia one right. Where do I go with this one? And I realize the winner plays my alma mater. So am I supposed to choose the one that I think my alma mater has a better chance of beating? I just don't know where to go with this. Give me double upsets. Give me the Broncos. Let's go. I have no idea what's going to happen. And that's beautiful. All I know is we better than what we had to watch last night. And I will never forgive the selection committee for not putting Indiana State in instead of Virginia. We could have been watching Larry Nerd. You screwed us out of that. Terrible job, selection committee. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Who knows? You might totally redeem yourself tonight, though. Let's have some exciting basketball. And you know what happens tomorrow. That's right. Hope you scheduled your vasectomies. We'll talk to you soon.